Joe Biden is taking aim at MAGA radicalism in his first ad of 2024. Team Biden released a minute-long clip decrying the right-wing extremist movement taking over the country, exclusively to MSNBC, and we can show some of it right here.
There's something dangerous happening in America. There's an extremist movement that does not share the basic beliefs in our democracy. All of us are being asked right now, what will we do to maintain our democracy? History's watching. The world is watching. And most important, our children and grandchildren will hold us responsible. The Vice President and I have supported voting rights since day one of this administration, and I ask every American to join me in this cause.
According to new Economist YouGov polling, just 39% of adults approve of Joe Biden's job performance, with 59% disapproving of his job as commander-in-chief thus far. In a general election matchup, the incumbent was neck and neck with former President Donald Trump. One former Biden-Harris administration staff member took to CNN last night to explain why they quit over the president's refusal to listen to his constituency on the issue of the siege in Gaza. Let's take a listen.
Throughout the government, throughout this administration, who have repeatedly tried to use every avenue available to them to raise concerns because they care about this country, they care about this president, and they care about our democracy. And I think what the president is doing by ignoring the will of the people and by ignoring all of these individuals who have continuously supported his agenda, I think it's undermining our democratic ideals and it's undermining America.
Do you think that this issue could cost Biden the 2024 election? And if it does, would you be comfortable with that?
Listen, I don't think that that's my decision to make. I think it's the president's. He's the one on the ballot. He's the one who has the power with a phone call to end this violence, to make demands of the Israeli government to end the indiscriminate violence against Palestinians. And so I think if the president wants to ensure a second term, if he wants to ensure the support of millions of Americans who are part of his base, who have supported him, you know, I think he needs to hear what the people are saying, and I hope he does.
If he doesn't support a ceasefire, would you vote for him?
I think the president has a lot of time before the election, but there are millions of Palestinians who don't have a lot of time, whose lives are in immediate danger.
So I thought that was a pretty remarkable line of questioning from Abby Phillips there, seeming to try to lean on the guest a little bit to acknowledge that he was going to commit to some kind of vote blue no matter who, even as he has just taken this incredibly courageous step to step down from his senior position in the Department of Education.
Well, he didn't say he would vote blue no matter who. But he left it semi-ambiguous. But
well, no, I think he's not going to. But he felt what I'm commenting on right now is Abby Phillips, who was clearly trying to exert pressure on him in that direction. And maybe I'm projecting a little bit at this point, but you can kind of see her blink almost as though she's listening to something in her ear to ask the follow-up question, are you going to vote for him? Which, of course, is a real distraction from the reality, which is what he set out, I think, very clearly there. It's on Joe Biden. He has an opportunity, regardless of what I'm going to do or the next person is going to do, he has an opportunity to make himself a viable candidate in the eyes of all the people who are criticizing him by simply changing course on this issue, picking up the phone and exerting the same influence that Reagan did in 1982 in the Israel-Lebanon war. He's choosing not to do that, and he cannot expect his own voter base, who overwhelmingly want him to do something different, to look the other way when something so significant is happening on the world stage.
What did you think of the ad, targeting the MAGA movement? Had a little bit of a basket of deplorables kind of vibe to me. You know, whatever you think, Trump is, by some polls, has a larger share of the vote right now than Joe Biden has. So portraying this as some curious, weird, quirky, small group of people who needs to be defeated is, I think, an odd choice. Furthermore, look, I don't know how you can get around the optics. Trump is the one who might not be on the democracy at stake, but Trump is the one who might not be on the ballot. And also, while it did clearly work to some degree to wave the January 6th flag in the 2022 midterms, Trump's candidates who had particularly talked about that issue a lot did not fare well. So, fair enough to remind voters of it and how Trump threatened the transfer of power in that way. I don't know if it's going to continue to have purchase into 2024. What do you think?
I saw a clip of Proud Boys, which are a neo-fascist militant organization, marching with tiki torches, people that Donald Trump described famously as very fine people on both sides. I saw clips from 1/6 where his supporters, who he encouraged to go and protest at the Capitol, legally, but he did encourage them, mounted a noose with the intention of hanging his former vice president. And I think that most Americans, as you've often pointed out, do not associate themselves with the insanity that happened on 1/6. They don't see themselves as violent. They don't see themselves as people who want to be a part of tiki torch-led mobs or lynch mobs or anything of the like. And I think that whether or not the use of the word MAGA is too broad and over-inclusive, the imagery is very clear about who we're talking about. And I think that that's a group that most Americans, frankly, don't want to see themselves a part of and don't see themselves as being a part of. Trump has been vulnerable when members of his own constituency have had difficulty in justifying why they're going to turn out and vote for them. So I think that this kind of an ad it's a voter suppression ad. It's not an ad that's going to make anybody want to come out for Joe Biden, of course. I don't think there's very many people who ever voted for Donald Trump who would consider voting for Joe Biden. But the question is whether you think, well, enough is enough. I'm going to cast my lot for Nikki Haley or somebody else who seems more mainstream and reasonable. And then in the general election, if that candidate doesn't win, basically just sit it out.
Do you think Joe Biden would prefer to have Nikki Haley as a opponent? I don't think so. I don't think Joe Biden wants to help Nikki Haley defeat Donald Trump in the primaries. If he does, he's very just politically foolish because Nikki Haley, I mean, the polls show he would have a much more difficult time. I mean, right now, a lot can change. I'm not saying it's predictive, but that would be a much tougher opponent for him.
Yeah, I think that seems evidenced by the polls. The polls were also very clear that Bernie Sanders had a much better margin of victory over Donald Trump back in 2016. That didn't make the Democratic Party very interested in picking him as a candidate. They don't make strategic decisions based on who is most electable. They make decisions based on who is chosen and what they've decided, ignoring the will of the voters, which is why they're not having a primary, which is why Biden's not submitting to any debates, and why there have been efforts across the country to kick Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips off of the ballot.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how this continues to shape up. Tomorrow on Rising, we are passing the baton over to Jessica Burbank and Amber Duke because this does it for me and Briahna for our first week back in 2024. We will have lots more content in the weeks and months to come.
Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you prefer to listen on the go, remember that you have that ability to do so as well. And take care. We will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.